So thank you very much. Thank you for Olga and Juan for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I apologize to present in English, but I'm pretty sure that you don't want to listen to my poor German. And it's also complicated for me to present my work now because we spent the whole afternoon seeing really beautiful drawings. And yeah, let's see what happens. So I'll show what I call my nighttime job. Is the works that are self-commissioned. So projects that I do for myself because I enjoy doing projects. But I have a topic that tries to put all these projects together, which is the problem of how objects touch the ground, what is known as ground conditions. And my interest in ground conditions is that I understand that implicitly or explicitly it involves an idea of publicness, and it carries a political agenda always. So we live in strange times, we all know it. Events that seem impossible to happens unceasingly. We see Donald Trump, we see Brexit, we see alternative facts, artificial intelligence, renders that look like pictures, pictures that look like renders, the Anthropocene, you can name a few. My feeling is that architecture has been only trying to remediate the malaise of neoliberal capitalism instead of having like a more engaged position into these topics. I think that usually we approach these problems in a silly, naive, or what Alex Williams and Nick Zinnick would call folk politics. So I started to ask myself what architecture can do to respond to these events in a scalable way, not only in a moral, personal way, but in a scalable, global way. So to start it, I want to talk a little bit about my interest in drawings. So for example, one question would be, if in the 20th century, housing was the idea of, it had this image of the post-war European city in the periphery of the city, in the garden, what would be housing in the 21st century neoliberal capitalism? So inspired by the idea of sampling and remixing, I start to, from hip hop or techno, I start to remix Corbusier's plan. I realized that it looks in fact like a section, so I made a section of it, taking elements from the original section, and also I realized that the section looks like a floor plan. So rotating it and populating it with elements from the original floor plan, it produced this kind of drawing. So for me the important thing here is that a drawing is not a representation of a slice of a building that exists right now or will exist in the future, or a drawing is not something that will be translated to concrete, steel or glass, but a drawing is a tool to think. A drawing is what produces the image of reality, and I would defend that architecture exists in multiple medium, and I would say that it's not in a hierarchical way. So architecture can exist as drawing, it can exist as building, as 3D model, as scale model, as animation, and they are all in the same hierarchy. So it's not, we do not make drawings to build, we make drawings because architecture inhabits in drawings. So what happens when you put this floor plan with this section, it creates this kind of building. And I to answer the question of how it would look like housing nowadays, I would say that it would be in mega cities of exploding exponential growth like Hong Kong. And I would argue that also this housing in 21st century should also accommodate capital, not only humans. So the tower should be very, very tall. It has a top, but it's never to see it. It's never possible to see it because it needs to be very tall to accommodate all these different kinds of inhabitants, not only humans. So I became interested in the problem of the ground and the relation between architectural object and the ground. And I'm very interested in this old-fashioned kind of drawing, the orthographic projection. So don't worry, I will not only show old drawings and old black and white pictures. So this is Albert Dürer diagram. Is one of the first drawings of this kind. My interest here is that it not only shows the objects or the buildings or architecture, but it also shows the ground. So through history, the idea of the ground coincides with the idea of what is public. So this is Colin Rowe's cover of the Collage City. It is Wiesbaden, and it shows two different diagrams of figure ground. So this must be not new for all of you, but you have on one side the classical idea of figure ground, where ground are the buildings and figure is the public space. And then on the other side you have the modern idea of figure ground, where ground is the public and figures are the buildings. But I think that in 21st century this is changing. So ground that used to be this continuous plane and stable reference, where all conflicts are negotiated, like public against private, mass against void, has been subject to a radical transformation now. This is Hong Kong, and Hong Kong enhances three-dimensional connectivities in the city in such a degree that that architecture loses reference to grounds. It becomes a continual figure-figure connection between all these different private buildings. And the experience of the city becomes an experience of a urban scale interior. Things that would happen outside or in the ground happens all the time inside these figures. So cigarette smoking, fire staircase. I've seen protests happening inside the shopping mall, food courts. All the social life happens inside these private objects. So I started to design a city into one single object with a continuous figure-to-figure relationship, where all the social activity of the urban scale interiority is obviously shopping. So this is how it looks. And then this is a section of it. And I was asking one of the students today of what to do with these slabs start to become vertical or diagonal, and what kind of events can happen inside it. And this is a question that I ask myself all the time. But this project allowed me to come with an answer to that became something very important for me, for my understanding of architecture nowadays. So this is how it looks inside. And some parts of the building are not inhabitable for humans. And what I realized that architecture through the history produced shelter for all kinds of objects, not only for humans. And I will exemplify with two towers in New York. So the first tower is the AT&T tower. It has no windows. It has no natural lighting. It has no natural ventilation. And the reason of that is because this building is designed for the comfort of computers and not of human. So I would argue that the inhabitant of this tower is data, is information. And what used to be some kind of funny curiosity a few decades ago start to spread around the world with buildings designed for functioning of our contemporary institutions. So what we call the cloud is nothing else than a big dumb building somewhere else. Another example of inhabitant that architecture shelters is very well shown on this Vignoli Tower in New York. It's the tallest residential building in the US. And what is interesting for me is that they sold all units before the building was done. In the day that all keys were handled, no family moves into the building, no single human moves inside this building. So the story is that all units were bought as financial investment because this is very safe investment unless there is like some kind of tsunami and tornado or something that's like a natural accident. This is a safe investment for money. So the quality criteria here for capital is its safety. So to solve that problem of the diagonal slabs and vertical slabs, I produce a zoning map where in green you have human inhabitants, in red you have data, and in blue you have capital. So this is how it looks like. This is how you access it, so cable cars, which is not so strange in Wuppertal. And the building is placed in this Italian village. It has a figure-ground relationship, that is, if it sits, it fits. So basically, it doesn't really care about what is the size. So my interest here in this project is to produce the image of what we are proposing as society. So this is a caricature of what we are choosing. Like a caricature is the idea that, so if someone gonna draw me, I have like big ears, so they make it even bigger, and it looks even more like me than a normal drawing of myself. And if David Drew is right, and I agree with you, architecture is the discipline that by excellence produces the image of reality. Not only today, but also in the future. So this project for me tries to bring some awareness of what the future will look like with our choices. I wouldn't say this is utopic or dystopic. I would say it's a realist project. So following Peter Truman, I start to collect examples of how architecture starts to stack and or pile, and how it loses relation to the ground. So you start to see it each time more. Maybe this is even a caricature of that, and this is when this starts to produce urban conditions. And funnily, we are discussing surrealism today and Magritte. And he was showing this reality that is happening right now. So,
Sealand. Pirate radio, kidnapping, battles. The Principality of Sealand has seen all of these things and more, despite only being a tiny micronation about 7 nautical miles off the coast from Suffolk, England. If you haven't heard of Sealand before, it's the site of one of Britain's Maudsley naval sea forts that were utilised during World War II, of Roy Bates, broadcaster of the illegal station Radio Essex, aka Britain's Better Music Station, was caught by authorities and ultimately needed a new location for his pirate station. What better place for a pirate radio station than at sea in international waters? Using his military training, he was a major in the British Army during the war, he managed to evict the squatters, before becoming one himself. Along with his 15-year-old son, he declared his oceanic fort an independent sovereignty and renamed it Sealand. With the court's 1968 ruling, by 1975, Bates was doing his best to prove that he was serious about Sealand being a country. At the encouragement of his wife, Joan, he wrote a constitution, designed a flag, wrote a national anthem, invented a unit of currency, and even had postage stamps made up. In the following years, he would also add passports to that list, which, to this day, you can purchase. During this time, he was approached by a myriad of individuals and organisations wishing to use Sealand's location for their own gain. Bates turned them all away, at least until 1978. A group of self-proclaimed diamond merchants from the Netherlands and Germany asked Bates and his wife to join them in Austria so they could discuss a business proposition. Everything seemed to be legitimate until the meeting time came and went without the group showing up. Concerned, Bates attempted to make contact with Michael via phoning some fishermen, but learned from these fishermen that a helicopter had been spotted over the country. The Invaders were a group led by the self-proclaimed Prime Minister of Sealand, German lawyer Alexander Eichenbach, who had hired Dutch, Austrian and German mercenaries to aid him in taking over the fort. Bates wasn't going to give up his country so easily, though according to Michael was furious that his son had let the helicopter land. Once reunited with his son, Bates and Michael armed themselves and enlisted the aid of a helicopter pilot who had worked on the James Bond franchise, which is very fitting here. According to Michael, they approached the fort into the wind to mask the sound of the helicopter and chose dawn to strike when the invaders were likely to be groggy or still asleep, but there was still enough light to attack the former, armed with a sawed-off shotgun, and the latter with a pistol. The usurpers emerged from the fort to see what was going on. While many reports say Michael fired a warning shot at them, which scared the invaders out of their wits, no doubt also because of the action hero-like entrance, Michael doesn't claim such. Nevertheless, when the invaders saw the princes of Sealand had returned armed, they surrendered immediately and were subsequently tried and found guilty of treason, then held as POWs until their home countries could negotiate their release. The price of this release was set at about the equivalent of $35,000 in Deutschmarks, or about $125,000 today. Germany then sent one of their diplomats to negotiate the release of the POWs. This also bolstered the Bates' claim that Sealand was an independent nation, or so the family stated, as Germany had now undergone diplomatic relations with the micronation. After a couple of weeks of negotiation, the Bates family let the invaders go. However, once back home, the ousted Prime Minister of Sealand, Archenbach, set up the Sealand rebel government as a government in exile and the true rulers of Sealand. No one else bothered to try and utilise the country again until the Falklands War in 1982. Some Argentinians asked Bates to sell Sealand to them due to its proximity to England. He respectfully declined. In 2008, representatives of Sealand won the World Egg Throwing Championship. Sealand participates in various sporting events, often with athletes from various nations volunteering to represent the nation. In 2007, the popular torrent site, the Pirates Bay, attempted to purchase Sealand, but were turned away. And in 2000, Sealand became the home to Havenco, a data hosting service company, with Michael Bates listed as one of the directors of the company. The company later ceased to be in 2008, but in 2013 was resurrected. These days, Sealand generates income by offering titles to regular Joes like you and me. For a mere £29.99, you can become a Lord or Lady of Sealand, or if you've got extra cash to blow, you can shell out £199.99 and become a Count or Countess of the micronation.
So, the idea is that it can work as a new kind of urbanization. Another perfect client would be China. China has been creating artificial grounds in the Chinese Sea as a way of territorial expansion. It's a way of claiming for jurisdiction of the Chinese Sea. So they've been building 3.5 acres per day, which is very impressive. And the point is that the Chinese Sea is the busiest transportation sea in the world, accounting for 1/3 of world shipping trades. So with 5 countries claiming for parts of this sea, China has been building these islands on these territories. The problem is that these are uninhabited territories, and it's hard to claim for jurisdiction of uninhabited territories. So for me, the interest is that Heidegger used the example of the analysis of tools that we only become aware of a tool when it stops working. So we only become aware of the ground during an earthquake, or in this case, when it disappears. So this formal relationship of figures against no ground is able to produce new political ideas, and political imagination is able also to produce new ideas of city diagrams. The interior of it is a collage of the most important buildings of the 20th century. So you can see there is the Bauhaus, there is HSBC, there is Sydney Opera House, there is Jewish Museum. And this interest led me to recently produce this research at the Valent Academy in the University of Gothenburg to develop a non-exhaustive collection of sections and try to understand all the kinds of figure ground diagrams and the political implications of it. So it's called The Politics of the Ground. And each 2 days I upload a new section that I think that shows an interesting figure ground diagram. So you see, like now I see with the recent spread of neoliberal ideology, we see each day more what they call is not libertarian, is how Patrick Schumacher would call himself. Wait,
Liberal?
not? No, I think it's libertarian. No, yeah, libertarian. It's here. So they are proposing these libertarian cities. It's according to the proponents, is a way to get rid of the state, in a way to feed the hungry, cure the sick, clean the atmosphere, and enrich the poor. But basically they don't want to pay taxes, or they don't want to share wealth with the rest of the society. Like there is this kind of proposals take as granted that there is no society, there is just a bunch of individuals that are competing against each other, and unfortunately they all share the same space. But it's very expensive and it's very hard to produce these new grounds. And this is apparently very soon to be built in the French Polynesia. So Peter Thiel, which is one of the founders of PayPal, he created an institute called the Seastead Institute, and they got an agreement with French Polynesia to build it as a semi-autonomous area. And they published last year a cryptocurrency to prepare for the construction of these new grounds. But another terraforming case that I am interested is the product of what orthodox economists call externalities. So an externality is what happens, is the side product of the decision between two actors. So, for example, pollution is defined as a negative externality, as if these actors had no responsibility over it. One negative externality is what is now known as the Great Atlantic Garbage Vortex. So this is the Atlantic, and because of the sea currents, it's producing a huge new ground, a kind of new continent. And it's funny because in a recent discussion with Wei Hong Cha, he brought to my attention that Timothy Morton was saying that a styrofoam floating here, it transcends places because it could come from everywhere, and it transcends classes because it could be something that someone rich or someone poor that throw away. So he flattens the responsibility of the production of these new grounds. And also the term Anthropocene, which is the idea that human beings are the most important actor of geological transformation in the planet. It also flattens responsibility, sharing it equally with all humans. But I understand that it's more precise to understand, to call this new geologic area as a Capitalocene, being capital the major force of transformation in our planet. So one phase of the Capitalocene is the privatization of profits, and the other phase is this new ground that represents the socialization of losses. So in the Capitalocene, the most absolute form-finding, form-making algorithm is capital itself. And it's expanding to cover not only land, but to occupy the whole surface of our planet through new cities that produce its own grounds. And today I learned that I should not finish a lecture with a thank you. So maybe we just can have a conversation if we have time, or we shift to Adil's conversation.